Personal branding, self-promotion, getting noticed. If those phrases make you uncomfortable, you are not alone. Self-promotion often feels strange, possibly because of others' perceptions of us, the fear of rejection, or fear of failure. And I know many of you job seekers know the importance of branding. We've talked in this podcast about getting our resumes improved and getting our LinkedIn's optimized and how we really show up to interviews. The concept is there, but oftentimes it still feels uncomfortable and the execution is difficult. My next guest, Vanessa Errecarte, tells us that self-promotion doesn't have to be stressful, time-consuming, or inauthentic. In fact, she teaches one of the nation's only MBA courses on personal branding. In her new book, Valuable and Visible, Redefining Personal Branding by Leading with Impact over Image, rejects legacy definitions of personal branding focused on self-promotion. Instead, it shows how to build a service-based, credible, and authentic digital reputation that can help you achieve your wildest professional goals. So today we're going to be talking about personal branding, and this message is for those who might feel uncomfortable. You might even hate self-promotion. I know I always did. And this will help you feel really a sense of comfort when you hop on LinkedIn. So without further ado, this is episode 402 of the Career Warrior Podcast. All right, Vanessa, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I absolutely love your work. You have been my workout buddy in my ears often. So I love being here and thanks again for having me.
Nice. That means so much. I want to open up with a hotbed question here. What is the biggest mistake you believe job seekers are making when it comes to personal branding?
Yes. Pretty much from the day we enter kindergarten or sooner, we are taught to apply to things in life. We're taught to color inside the lines, all that. And when we do that, we lose our distinction. We become more of the same. These days in 2026, we talk about AI sameness, right? But this has happened to us as humans for decades. This is not a new issue. And we think that that's actually a good thing when we go out to apply to a job. And yeah, you don't want to get too crazy with the resume, right? Some of these documents are intended to be the same, which is what we all complain about. How do we really stand out with this one document, right? So when it comes to building a personal brand, that's your time to be distinctive. So instead of going online and in person and saying what you think people want to hear for the job you're seeking, you need to kind of find that middle ground between, yes, show your competence, but take this opportunity of building this personal brand to also show your distinction. Because we all have seen those people side by side where, and sometimes I hate, this is actually my pet peeve, when you see two people and they're like same age, same experience, one might even have more than the other, right? A little bit or a little more knowledge or whatever. And you see the one person just going for it and they seems so distinctive, so interesting, right? This is not magic. Like they learned how to do that just like they potty trained, just like they learned how to talk, just like they learned how to walk, right? We're not born leaders. We're not born distinctive, right? We can learn this. And I think some people think some people are special, some people aren't. So I'm going to put my head down, work hard, and really show them that I can do everything they need me to do. And I think that is the biggest mistake we can make in 2026. We will get looked right over.
That's so good. Yeah, I've mentioned it in the past episodes, and I'm not trying to knock AI all the time, but that's truly one of the risks is by using these tools and relying on them too much is you'll get the same sort of language or style or flair that ChatGPT might use, and recruiters are seeing kind of the same thing over and over again. I know a lot of people when they look on LinkedIn or when I look on, for example, Instagram and I'm seeing like events being promoted, I'm seeing kind of like the same style. And
what do you mean? Like short sentence, short sentence, short sentence?
Exactly. Yeah. Or just the event posters that are just like chock full of text and information. So a lot of that sameness that we're talking about, it's a serious issue. And job seekers really need it's tough, but we need to find ways to stand out and find that uniqueness. So I think that's a good point. So we'll dive into your branding advice. I think that's going to be very useful for those who know it's important, but they might struggle with doing that. But I want to hear what's like your favorite branding tip when it comes to people who hate self-promotion.
Well, remember what a brand is. Brands, we have products, and if that alone sold what we needed to sell as corporate brands, brands wouldn't exist. So Nike only exists to sell the shoes and the equipment. And if Nike could, like I said, sell that without the brand, it would be a lot cheaper for them. So brands exist for the customer, for the relationship with the customer.
Yes.
We get wonky when we put personal in front of brand. And I have been in marketing my entire career. I am the type of person where I'm like, put me behind the camera and let me grow other people, right? And so I get it. Like, self-promotion is ick. I hate it. I hate it. I want my work to speak for itself. And we've been told that, right? Which is also untrue and unfair to tell people. And so when I tell people like about personal branding, and when I teach it in this course that I've developed, I tell people from the start, I tell students, put your shoulders down, take your tongue off your palate, or whatever the gurus say about relaxing, and don't think about yourself. Picture right in front of you right now, someone who you could help with something. Who's someone in your life that's struggling with something? Bonus points if it's related to your profession, but just do this exercise first. Who's someone that you can help with something? Because that's what the best corporate brands do. You don't actually care how the air technology is made in Nike's shoe, right? But I'm 44 years old and I love running. And now I'm starting to think about, geez, I want to be able to run for a long time. I don't want to be like the people who are like, man, running used to be great, and now my knees, and now this and that. And so for me, I'm like, I want to know that I can rely on the shoe that's going to keep me safe from injury, that's going to keep me safe from like those chronic long-term shin splint type things, that kind of stuff. Right? And so if a brand can communicate that to me, I kind of don't care that much about the product. And that's what a personal brand is too. Like, I'm a human and I could tell you that like, oh, I've gotten these awards and I have all these degrees and, here's who I am in that way. But you don't actually care. You're really busy. And I mean, it's not that you're, a selfish person or whatever. It's just that you have a lot going on in your life and with your loved ones that you want to do better. And so unless I'm signaling that I can help in some way, like the best corporate brands do, you're going to scroll on by because I'm talking about my product instead of my offer. So when you talk about the offer, that's when the relationship's formed. I mean, it's how
I want to dive into what that might look like for a job seeker and like how that would play out on LinkedIn, for example, because that is so brilliant. I think for me, when I hear that, I think the pressure is off of me to look like a self-inflated idiot because it's just like, it feels like that sometimes when we post on LinkedIn. It's just like, oh, like, look how awesome I am. And I don't want people to get that impression of like, look how awesome I am, because the focus is on me in that mistake. I'm thinking about what I can do to look great and attractive when the reality is we need to be focusing on the problem that the other person would be solving. And in this context, that would be the hiring manager, correct? Or is that different?
So this is where it gets a little tricky because again, this whole concept of stop applying, we think it might be the hiring manager, but I always talk about secondary audiences having their place in personal branding as well. So an example I give, I always relate things to corporate branding because I think when we do that, we kind of remember the discipline of branding. And that's important to do because that's the whole point, is using what we know works in branding and marketing to form the best relationships personally too. I think we've lost sight of that because we try to copy what other people do on the internet.
Yes.
Other people do on the internet are exactly as you said. Like, I open up LinkedIn and people are so excited to update me about their random certifications, right? And they don't like it either, and they're getting exhausted by it. And so Lululemon, for example, never marketed to men for the first several years of the existence of their company. But they had a men's section and it was small. And now if you walk into any Lululemon store, it's equal. But they did that without marketing to men because they knew that that was a powerful secondary audience that the men were finding out from the women in their lives about this brand. And so they invested heavily in who they needed. Isn't that funny? And so we see brands that do this, right? How many times have you noticed a brand that might not be speaking directly to you, but you've noticed the utility? of it and you've gotten drawn in, or someone's told you about it because they're an ideal audience, but they think it works for you too. So your brands are not aspirational. So when you think about who people want to hire, they are not hiring someone who's excited to learn things. And they are not hiring someone who is sharpening their skills in a certain area, right? They want to hire that person that's going to help them make the organization better, that has already learned all of these things and already has these skills that are going to make their organization amazing. And so you need to speak to people. You need to help people on your level. When Coke launched, it was a tonic. So they were selling a medicine. They didn't say someday I'm going to sell Coke Zero. They didn't, and it would have meant nothing to people. So figure out something you can help with that, and who are you going to teach? So let's say you want to move up in sales. How can you teach an aspiring salesperson to make a more natural close? And then that secondary audience that's going to notice you is that hiring manager. And this is why I tell my students, if you have a personal brand that's way different than what you do as a profession, but you can relate it in some way, go with the passion. I have so many different case studies of these cool brands that at first you would say, this is what they're talking about online most of the time, and it doesn't really have to do with their job, but then they connect it well, and it does make them a better leader, or it does make them a better product manager. And we can get into that later. But the hiring manager's secondary audience, usually.
Okay. That makes so much sense. And that's how it would come across as natural. And so you're telling me that I shouldn't just be using LinkedIn when I am on the job search and just posting about I need a job. This is me right now, like kind of like off and on kind of thing. This should be more natural and more flow more in some sort of way, correct?
Yes, I am a fan of the long game. And that's where, as far as the job search goes, I think the personal brand, that should just be part of everything you do in 2026, because when you think about this week, we all on Sunday evening, we're sifting through the Sunday scaries and we're thinking about where we need to show up, what we need to be prepared for in certain meetings, how we're going to respond to things, maybe what we need to wear on certain days, all of those kinds of things, right? But we don't give any thought to how we're going to show up online for the week. Yet we're spending over 8 hours a day online. 8 hours, 3 minutes average a day in the US is what we spend online if we're professionals. And so then we eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, get distracted for a little bit, with chores. We're online more than we're in person, but we never think about routine ways to show up there when that's how we plan our in-person lives all the time. So I always say I like people to strive for at least one thought leadership post a week on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I can talk to you later about the formula of that post. But another thing is you should control your identity online too, because in person right now, I spoke with you before we got on the show and I'm having a delightful time, really excited to be here on the show. But if the Davis Police Department texted me right now and said, your identity's been stolen, you need to come down and talk to us, I'd be like, peace out, Chris. This is the most important thing to me. I got to go solve this. Online, we do nothing to protect our identity or even claim it. Very few people own their first and last name as a URL. And so once you're doing weekly thought leadership posts on LinkedIn, that's a lot of content for a very simple personal website. And again, professionals just don't do this or have this, but it elevates you so much and it allows you to own your own brand online.
Yeah. I want to talk about okay, first of all, let me take a side question here, because I know it's not all about LinkedIn. I know that's a big focus on the work, but where your personal brand shows up in terms of a channel, we think of marketing channels, the different ways. Where do we show up with a personal brand beyond just LinkedIn?
Yes. So I think that it should be very incremental because we don't want to give up on it. And I think that's the biggest challenge, right? We put our personal stuff last. It's like accountants put their own taxes last. I know for my consulting business, I put my own marketing last, right?
Yeah.
So we want it to be doable. So I always say, if you can start with that LinkedIn post a week, a very formulaic thought leadership post, after 2 months, you have enough to the very next thing I do is, again, have that URL, Make a simple website. Simple websites convert better. Too much information is distracting, et cetera. It takes longer to purchase. We know this in corporate branding. So very simple. And those 8 thought leadership posts become blog posts. And people say, like, blogs, we don't live in 2005. But here's the thing. We want to train the internet as a whole on who we are. We want to take control of that. And so you have, all the crawlers on the search engines, they're going to go look at what's scrubbable, those APIs that are scrubbable. So they're not even seeing what you're writing on LinkedIn. So you're forming this whole brand on LinkedIn. You've got to bring it to the rest of the internet world as well. And then I say something controversial as well. Take that same post.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Take that same post and please jump in. I get very excited. So you need to jump in whenever and be like, okay, Vanessa, stop, next question. But
keep going.
Also, I say put the same thing on Instagram as well.
Okay.
Because Instagram has become a place where since 2024, you see a lot more thought leadership on there. And a recent survey that was just reported on by Social Media Today has said that over 60% of people go to Instagram to find brands. And so I think that's also a great place to go.
Would you have that same advice for senior leaders versus somebody who is a younger generation, Gen Z, millennials? Do you believe across the board Instagram is a good channel for those?
Yes, I'm seeing actually so much more of that on Instagram. You see these it's almost more noticeable too, because you see these people that, are in their office and maybe look kind of old school, and then they go face to camera for a second, educate you on something, and they become a really cool mentor and friend. So yes, all ages.
Cool. You're giving it, this is advice. And I've worked, out of the thousands of people that we work with at Let's See Grandma, I'll tell you, most of them are not doing the website thing. And I almost wish I did this interview before, because it's such good advice, because it is so important for how we show up. You don't think people are Googling you or trying to find out information about you and what you know. And I think a website, given the fact that a lot of people are not doing it, is such a good way to distinguish ourselves and our personal brand. Yeah. And when the job search comes, you're gonna look great.
Well, and did you see that article in the New York Times end of April where it said Tim Cook's retiring from Apple and John Turnus is the next favored guy for the CEO role? And then they wrote about who John Turnus was. And I felt so bad for him, because John Turnus is actually the guy who, my daughter's 12 and so just got a phone for junior high, right? And you know how we have, most of us have these 3 dots on the back of our phone for the camera. But John Turnus is the guy at Apple who said, I'm going to make an iPhone that also has a lesser camera, the 1 dot, right?
Yep, this one right here.
Yes, so you can't take a 0.5 selfie. And so my daughter said to me, she goes, Mom, just don't get me the kid phone. And I'm like, the kid phone? What's the kid phone? And she's like, I want the 3 dots because I want to take the 0.5 selfie. And I'm like, that is so cool. John Turnus created a product suite for the first time out of this iPhone that's never had a product suite. But then a sentence in the New York Times about John Turnus, when they described his skills, they said, now Apple just needs to decide if they want another deft manager, which sounds bad, but we know that's a great manager that can keep the ship sailing, keep the people happy, keep the profit going, like Tim Cook did. But the sentence said, do they want another deft manager or an innovator? But no one ever told John Turnus that he needed to teach people to say and. That he needed to position himself on, hey, as this engineer that worked within Apple, I made this huge shift to a product suite with this one little change. That's innovative. So it's we need to take charge and train people who we are.
So this episode is for people who hate self-promotion, personal branding. And already just listening to this episode so far, we've given you some things, or Vanessa's given you some really cool things that you can do. One thing that I felt people might be uncomfortable with is the thought leadership post. And I just know that from after giving talks, and sometimes people just genuinely don't know what to say. Do you have any advice for people on just how to get started in brainstorming what to say in that thought leadership post?
Yes, absolutely. So first, you have to be a thought leader to make a thought leadership post. And so being a thought leader is saying something we haven't heard before. That's when we elevate someone to expert, right? If you tell me the sky is blue, I might scroll on by. But if you tell me we've gotten it all wrong because we ignore half the time when we say the sky is blue, I'm going to stop and be like, this is an interesting person with something to say. Tony Robbins says knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. Action is power. He's signaling to us that he's going to teach you how to take action with your knowledge. And that if you just think knowledge is power, you're wrong. And that's why your life is stagnant, right? He's Mr. Life Coach. We know this. So how do we think about that for ourselves? It's actually embarrassingly easy. It's just that no one teaches this. And I think it needs to be in 2026 an academic discipline for everyone. Because again, it's not a secret. You can be distinctive too. So first, there's the truth framework. This is what I have people follow. First, there's the T, and that's what does everybody think? What are the tropes in your industry or whatever it is you want to do your thought leadership about? So you want to kind of find a theme to your thought leadership each week. We don't want it to be all random because again, back to brands for that specificity.
And that helps the job search too, of course, because we're applying for specific jobs.
Yes. And I even had a student once who was a food blogger, but she themed her food blog into how to manage the business better with certain things. So she would talk about ingredients like, hey, the menu's not expensive because you see they're using this across all these recipes. So she had a really neat way of relating it to business, and she got a promotion at Comcast to
so cool.
Project manager. Yeah. And with
That's
her
so
food
cool.
blog, right? So
the Venn diagram of your true passion and your career. Like, I love that. The intersection.
Yes. In fact, that's
so
chapter
cool.
2 of the book is like personal, professional, personal brand.
Boom. Love it.
And so, you want to try to relate something, if it is your passion, to the work. But first, what does everybody in this industry think? So everybody thinks personal branding is about you. Okay. What's the real problem? The real problem is when you think personal branding is about you, you've lost the definition of a brand. Brands are about the customers or your potential audience. 3 is you, understanding of a better solution. I know that to brand yourself in a way that's memorable on and off the feed, you have to help someone with a problem they have. And you have to show them a new way to solve it. All of a sudden, then, you elevate to someone they trust, right? Whenever someone gives us advice, we do it and it works. They gain trust. Trust is what makes us remember people, repeat people, refer people, right? Corporate brands do this, know this, they do it every day. Then you have your other T, and that is tested reasoning. So if we're going to say personal branding is not actually about you, I better be able to back that up with branding theory and evidence, right? I better be able to compare someone that is saying a certification on LinkedIn and someone that's continually helping people with things and say, this is why it works better. This can be empirical research, it can be observation, it can be outcomes from the past, client work, whatever it is, you just have to have something to prove it, okay? Proof is not difficult, it's just often overlooked. And then finally, you have H, and this is what happens a lot, and I tell my students, please don't forget this part. Call your people to action. So at the beginning of this podcast, I said, picture that person you could help right now by teaching them a different way to do something or a different way to solve their problem. Just then, I made you maybe a little bit more comfortable in how you could make posts. And so maybe you gained some trust for me, but you have to ask people to do something, and to succeed, it has to be small enough that they can do it and succeed so that they can gain that trust. So that's how you form distinction. And then what I like to do is, instead of using AI for an answer all the time, which 99.99% of people do, be different. AI gets 2.5 billion queries a day, so it knows things, knows lots of secrets. Lots of market research for free. So put your truth framework into AI and say, look at my real problem. Give me 40 other real problems I might be missing about this topic. And then you might find 5 more ways to look at something differently. And that's it. All of a sudden, you're the most interesting person in the room.
That's like that was another question I had for you in the future, is like, how do you use AI within this process? You're not using it as a replacement of the tool. You're using it as a, how can I go further and just push this to the next level, which I think is a really cool prompt idea. So
yeah, because then when you prompt it later, like if you do need help with the writing, like I actually think, even especially like say English is your second language or something, AI can be a wonderful helper and an equalizer in ways we've never had it before. But its job is to give you that common pattern And so if you think about the way Gemini works, like now it sucks if you're the first person on Gemini because you're sandwiched in that first paragraph that no one clicks on with 40 other websites. So if you're saying the sky's blue, you're sandwiched with 40 people that are saying that. And AI's done its job because most people read that and they're fine. They're satisfied. But if you say most people think the sky's blue, but you're missing half the time this incredible part about the sky, all of a sudden AI is like, well, shoot, I'm just a machine, so I can't fit this into that pattern. I'm not reasoning, right? I'm just looking at patterns, even though it likes to try to sound like it's a human. So now I need to put this website on its own line, right? And often those lines that we see after the first paragraph have one distinct link associated. So that's how we have a chance at actually getting clicked on these days, or even just noticed as like, well, Vanessa thinks this, right? Here's this first paragraph where personal branding is all about your credentials, your presence, your values, and showing that every day. That's what everybody thinks. Here's the second line where Vanessa's acknowledging that that's what everybody thinks, but she's saying it's actually about helping people with their problems. And now I have my own line.
Guys, this is awesome. And Vanessa, I'm hopefully not going to embarrass you right now real quick, but listeners, before this show even, Vanessa was asking like to tell more about listeners, more about you all, like what problems are you trying to solve? Like she practices what she preaches, and just to hear you talk about just what problem are we trying to solve, just making it less about ourselves. I think that's got to be the most powerful thing I've heard today in terms of how to feel less uncomfortable when it comes to branding and self-promotion. It's something I have to remind myself over and over again is like, who am I trying to reach out to right now? What am I trying to solve with this LinkedIn post? And again, if you make it about yourself, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, it is. It's so icky.
Yeah.
You want to feel like, when I went to like kind of design this course, I'm like, how can I make my students feel how I would feel when I'm posting for a client?
Yes.
Versus myself, right?
Yes.
And that's almost how you feel because it's about the audience, And so I'll give you one more little thing is here's a formula for those thought leadership posts so that it feels just easy and again, not about you. So we remember stories like 30% more than any other type of content. We know this in research, right? It's because we release that oxytocin when we hear stories. That's why our kids start like drooling when we read them books and are mesmerized. It's like that love hormone, right? Like makes us eat the second potato chip, make out longer, all the things. So that's happening when we see that story, right? And so, 2-sentence lead in of a middle of a story. The internet's all about the middle ugly part of life, right? Because that's what we're in, right? So the middle of that story, 2 sentences. Then you want to segue. I call this your wait what moment. Here's the counterintuition of you're missing a lot if you think the sky's blue. Everyone's wrong to say that. You're missing this whole fun thing you can do at night with the stars or whatever it is. Then be really smart. And whatever you're going to teach someone, think in 3 to 5 step increments. If you have 6 steps, you have 2 frameworks. And we're going to be doing thought leadership posts every week, right? So put a framework on it. I just shared with you my truth framework. It wasn't my truth framework when I started it. This is another way to use AI. Write out those 3 to 5 steps you're going to teach and say, let's make this into a framework after a word or the 3 C's or whatever you want it to be. But that automatically elevates something. And people are just MSU, as I say to my students, making shite up, but it works and it elevates it. So personal story, segue with the wait what moment into why does this matter? And then framework of what you're going to teach them. And then I always say video lead in. Hi, I'm Vanessa, and today I'm going to teach you a way to do personal branding that doesn't feel icky because it's not about you. And so then you already have your visual content. And again, just go face to camera, make it ugly.
So this is a LinkedIn post, the text with a video as a suggestion.
So that's what I encourage people to do. If you need to use like a stock photo or a still photo, don't let the video intimidate you. It's just that as far as like search engines and AI goes, first of all, Google owns YouTube. So when you go to make your own website, you embed that short little lead in, and it's good for your SEO because you have to use YouTube to embed. And then on social, we know that video goes farther too. And so it's just easy because your written work is going to do it for you. A lot of people go to make videos. I actually have people do it during class in selfie mode, and they're trying to tell me their whole post. And I'm like, no, just say, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. And today I'm going to teach you more about personal branding. Make it simple at first. So I call that the VABlog, video and blog, because that post is going to be kind of blog-like. So it could sound something like this. When my son was 5 days old, I had a client meeting, and my client actually asked me if I even liked my son. That was when I knew that things had changed, and that just trying to be the best at what we do does not necessarily elevate us to the best at who we are and where we can go in business. Ever since then, I'm on a mission to teach people that personal brands are not the enemy. Here are 3 steps to feel more comfortable. First 3 steps you can do to feel more comfortable in building your personal brand. And remember the how to act. Try step 1 and let me know how it goes.
Cool. And
then you're all curious about me too, right? You want to come back to me and you're like, what happened? Why did they ask her that? You want to hear about that meeting more, right?
Yeah, y'all, this is not rocket science. This is it's something that people just don't do, they don't execute, but this is something that should not intimidate you. This is something that is being laid out in front of you. And it's not all about the applicant tracking systems. It's not all about gaming the system to get noticed. Like, you need a good personal brand. You need to be posting, because eventually hiring manager is going to check out your LinkedIn, and guess what? They're going to see whether or not you are relevant for the job. So personal branding is so important, and it's something people skip over all the time. So thank you so much for breaking that down and making it just interesting for people. I think that's the stories, how we look, how we change our perspective is so valuable.
And Vanessa, if you want to tell the story about you, tell it about someone you helped once. You know, I have a student who has he was just in my last personal branding class, and I will never forget him because he grew up in India, and he volunteered at this girls' school in his rural village. And he had trouble. Like, he was really not trouble. He was just trying to be very purposeful, I should say, about deciding on his personal brand. So it took him a lot of iterations to get here. But finally, he told me this incredible story about his wave up moment. And he said that part of his job as a volunteer was to help the girls introduce themselves. And he went around to every girl in the school in this one session and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said the smartest girl that he knew should go be able to be a doctor in the US or something.
Yeah.
He said that she got so bright-eyed when it was her turn. She was ready, she was poised, and she said, I want to be a tailor. And he said, at that moment, I realized how certain groups can be victims of how they're raised and where they're raised, and that now he understands why we need to watch out for that in organizations. Because here was this woman who could do anything, and to her, the top thing was being a tailor, because that meant she owned a business in her village and was going to make money the rest of her life. When he saw all these other things in her. And I'm like, I want to hire you. I want to hire you, right? That relates to anything, you know?
That is so awesome. So I want to ask you about your book in just one second. But before we transition on over to that, is there anything that you think I'm missing or our listeners just absolutely need to hear when it comes to personal branding?
Yes. I think that everybody is full of baloney and imposters, right? So we all know,
okay.
I mean,
everyone,
right? If someone
just
knew
clarifying.
it all, if we actually, not full of baloney, everyone's imposters.
Okay.
The people that are full of baloney that present themselves as perfect, right? We actually don't love hanging out with them, and we don't relate to them. We're not going to linger that much on their posts anyway. And it's true in the marketing research, right? We may say we prefer the aspirational, perfect image, perfect writing, perfect whatever, but we linger on the authentic 20% longer. So our behavior and our intent and our intent are different, but behavior always wins. We know this. I can tell you that I'm a runner, but last 6 months I was pregnant with my son. Back when I wasn't running. So that marketer better have been looking at my FitnessPal data versus what I said I like to do online, right? Okay, behavior versus intent. We are always going to linger on the imperfect. So don't worry about feeling like you're not enough, because I always say that's a signal that if you know enough to know what you don't know, you certainly know enough to be a thought leader, right? I mean, use the truth framework. There are students with no experience and students with decades of experience that this all works for. And so I, at 44 years old, am a huge imposter. I feel that way all the time, every day. Felt that way before I came on the show, felt that way writing my book, feel that way all the time. I think we all do when we're like type A, like determined professionals.
Yeah.
And so I'm always very open about that, because instead of fighting it and thinking of it as a bad thing, I just hope that people can flip that as a signal. Because if you're using the truth framework and you're thinking about that counterintuitive point of view,
Yes.
it should feel weird to go out there and say personal branding's not about you. Who am I to say that? Right? I'm being brave. And so again, like, it's also a signal though that there might be some people that are like, personal branding is ick, and are losing opportunities that really need to hear it. So that's the one thing I want to just say is, like, if you're feeling that way, just
Yes.
like, I don't think it's ever going to go away. Just go with it and do the thing.
I love that. Listeners, you heard it. You don't need our permission, but we just gave it to you anyway. Go out there, be your authentic self, post on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid to feel like you're just an imposter, because I felt it too, absolutely, from putting stuff out there myself, and it always ends up being okay, always, and it's worth it. So,
and if you feel like you have a small audience, for example, and that makes you feel like an imposter, that's awesome. I mean,
yeah.
I love it when like someone says that they have good friends in their mom in their audience. That's a cool lab. They're going to kindly tell you what's working and what's not, and as your audience grows, you know that best content. And by the way, if you have an audience of 10 and 2 people are going to refer you because they're close to you and trust you, I like that audience much more than 100.
True.
With no one referring you. And that's the difference between a personal brand and an influencer. It's just that only 1% of people consistently post online. So we see those influencers and we think, okay, we need to show up every day in this perfect way, or we can't do this, right? But the influencer, nothing against influencers, but I try to make the distinction. If you're an influencer, you have a career as a media company. And so it is your literal job to show up every day, and you do need to put general content up there that appeals to masses of people so that you get masses of followers, so that companies want to exchange posts for money. That's different than having the credibility of a personal brand and the right people in your audience, so that when it does come time for you to have that consulting opportunity or make that pivot, you are noticed by that hiring manager secondarily, or whoever it is that's going to be the principal of that consulting job.
Makes so much sense. So you wrote this book, Valuable and Visible. I'll just repeat the title for listeners.
Yeah, but I don't like talking about it because I don't like throwing into myself. But go ahead, we'll do the hard
I'm going to
thing.
make you do it though, because it's my show. No kidding. Valuable and Visible, Redefining Personal Branding by Leading with Impact over Image. You're so good at storytelling. You just brought the importance of storytelling to this podcast episode, but I want to hear the origin story that no one has heard about how you ended up writing this book. Why did you write this book? What triggered it?
Mm-hmm. So when I told my dean, I really think we need a course in this, and he gave me the go ahead. When I first started teaching the course, it was so slide based of my own stuff because I really struggled to find literature at this area that we talked about today, where it's like, this is not about you. I'm copying. I also teach corporate branding and digital marketing at the UC Davis Business School. So it's like, it's kind of that intersection of the best, most efficient parts that you can do in 1 to 3 hours a week of both those things. And so I was frustrated because I could only find like the influencer get rich quick stuff or nothing. And again, nothing against that stuff. It just is different than what I was teaching. And so I ran the class like for a few years, and then 2 people, one is chapter 2 case study, one's chapter 12. They said, you really need to turn this into a book. We want to pass this on like to people. And, they said these like change your life words, right? And I'm like, okay, at first I was like, that's nice, flattered, but I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I did. I'm glad that I just did, because writing a book is hard, but here it is.
I don't want to do it anytime soon, but I think like listeners tuning into this episode who get the importance of personal branding, who want to put in the effort, like need to get this book, because you're going to be going and processing the same ideas, but in a different way with more detail. I am a podcast listener as much as I am a reader. I think you need both ways to process the information. So I get excited just thinking about it. But what's a key takeaway that you hope people get by the time they get to the last chapter?
Key takeaway is take it in increments. So every chapter I've put how long will it take and recap specific exercises. But remember what I said. Start with that LinkedIn post a week and just build in your own time. I hope by the time that you get to the last chapter, though, in your head, you're saying, this is stupidly simple. That is my goal. I want this to feel so simple and accessible to you because I want you to do it. And I think that sometimes we put all this mystery around marketing and we forget that it's about that memorability and that trust. And then you put the right base in place. And that's what drives growth. You don't need growth hacks if people are remembering, repeating, and referring you. But when you forget that or try to take a shortcut, that's when it starts seeming hard, corporate branding wise. So I hope it feels simple. I really, really do. That's my goal for the readers.
Awesome. Well, Vanessa, I'm going to say your name again. Vanessa Errecarte, everyone. She wrote Valuable and Visible, Redefining Personal Branding by Leading with Impact Over Image. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Just want to hear any last words of advice you have for people who are really struggling with their job searches right now. I try to reach out to those people with every episode, but wondering if you have anything for those folks.
Yes. So if you're on the job search right now and really struggling, steal a little bit of the truth framework. So part of the job is the resume is to sound like everybody else, and I get it. But if you can list all the steps of what you've done and make it sound like the job description, like we know we need to do, please take the liberty of putting one extra bullet point and saying, in this 4-step process, I refined step 2 to do this. Most people do this. And that actually made step 4 this much more efficient, right? What happens there? You've put that counterintuition. And again, on the AI crawlers with your resume, that's how you earn your own line with your resume. Like we were talking about with search engines, right? So now the resume goes, okay, the machine approving the resume goes, I approve this resume, but I can't quite fit it into the approved bucket because it said this extra thing. So a human needs to read it. So go ahead and just copy all of this counterintuition and like answer interview questions that way too. I always tell my students, stop and think before you answer any question and do the first 3 steps. What do they think? What's the common answer? What's the real problem with the common answer? And then how can you tie your understanding of a better solution into, sure, that's a great way to do it. I also do it this way. And this is why I want to serve you with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your advice and being on the show. I think like for you, I just really appreciated how you are all about what you talk about. Like you're asking, what do our listeners care about? You bring a sense of like a very, very fun way of explaining things that make branding less intimidating. So that was the whole point of this episode. So I feel like you hit the nail on the head here. And I really appreciate it, Vanessa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun. And again, I love your work and it's such a special thing you're doing for people. So thanks so much for having me today.
Awesome. And listeners, you know what I do. And whenever you're not jogging, driving, working out, whatever it is, I will link everything that we discussed in this episode in the show notes, including how to get Vanessa's book, her website, and I might even put together just some structure or some notes that will be helpful to kind of review this information. It's hard sometimes as we're listening to these podcast episodes to soak in everything. So I encourage you, if this episode meant a lot to you, listen to it again. If you are driving, put it on again, even if you use the speed up feature. Post this episode on LinkedIn, tag Vanessa, tag myself, and let us know what you got from this episode. And plus, it's another excuse for you to put something on LinkedIn that isn't just about you. So get going. I think this is going to be so valuable. So again, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, and I'll see you next time.